Welcome to a short video on how to write an essay. So with any essay, we need to start by interpreting the question. We need to think, what are the key words in the question? What key theories is it talking about? What main concepts is it asking us? And what does it want us to do with them? What is the question really asking? At this level of education, you are unlikely to get a question that just wants you to describe a particular theory or position. You're going to need to analyse it or apply it in some way. So you're not going to get a question that just asks you to describe Nietzsche's views on Christianity. You're going to be asked whether they are still relevant or how they compare to some of his other views or how they inform his views in Ecce Homo or something like that, that actually wants you to use the idea rather than just describe it. So when you come to start your research, you need to think about what you already know about the topic. What questions do you still need to answer? You need to think about whether your resources are relevant to the question. It's a good idea to be careful of the internet. I do warn people that Nietzsche is a subject which is a little controversial in some areas. It's certainly something that people like to talk about. And that means that there's a lot on the internet, but a lot of it is not by people who are experts in the subject. So you need to be careful of what resources you're using. So you need to be quite critical as you read and try and evaluate what you're looking at. When it comes to planning is very important because an essay plan stops you from getting lost in your writing. It helps to keep you on topic. It's really useful to think about word count, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a bit with an example. And it's helpful to think about roughly how much you want to put in each section, because that will help you to plan your research and work out how much information you need per section. Your introduction, your sentences at the start of each paragraph should of course show what you'll be saying in each section, and try and pull it into your overall line of argument. Your line of argument is really important for answering the question throughout your essay. So planning helps you then to pull out the important points, and it will help you to see where your argument lacks evidence, because you'll be able to plan out how your research fits your line of argument. With editing and ordering your research, you need to prioritise creating an argument rather than just showing your knowledge. As I said, it's very easy to see a phrase like the death of God and to find all of the information you can describing what Nietzsche says about the death of God and put it down in the essay. But of course, you've got to try and create an argument that answers the question around that. So using mind maps can be really useful for linking ideas together, and you need to consider all the time whether your materials and your arguments really help you answer the question. Now I'd like to look at an example to help us get a bit of a feel of how this works. So the example I've got is Kant's concept of the beautiful still relevant to modern aesthetics? And even if you don't have a clear idea of what Kant's concept of the beautiful is, we can still get an overview of how this essay would work. So let's say that this essay is about 3,000 words. Looking at the essay question, just describing Kant's concept of the beautiful is not going to be enough. That's not really going to answer the question. You are going to have to give an explanation of Kant's concept of the beautiful, but the question asks whether it is still relevant to modern aesthetics. And we can see by looking at the question that that's the bit that is going to be critical. You've got Kant's concept of the beautiful, which you will need to be quite descriptive about. But the analysis comes when you have to think about whether it's still relevant to modern aesthetics. And this is an area in which you'd have to do quite a lot of research. Using the word count can be really useful for getting an idea of how much time to spend on each subject. So if we've got 3,000 words, we know that the introduction and the conclusion will be roughly 10% each of that word count. So approximately 300 words will go into your introduction, approximately 300 words will go into your conclusion. As we've said, the second part of the essay, whether the concept is still relevant to modern aesthetics, is going to be the main critical part of the essay. So we could take maybe half the word count and use on that. So that's 1,500 words for that second part of the essay. We know then that we don't have a huge amount of words to spend on describing Kant's concept of the beautiful. And we probably want to leave some spare words to play with at the end of the essay. So we can look at a plan that has roughly 300 words for your introduction. Then for your main body, for explaining the concept, you might have a limit that you give yourself of around 750 words, so that you're not spending too much time describing the theory, but you've still got enough time to fully explain what Kant means. Then we might have our analysis of relevance, where we might look at, for example, 2 examples to show that it is relevant, 2 examples of people who have said that it's not relevant, and then a bit of discussion time. And that's roughly 5 sections then for your second half. If we divide 1,500 by 5, of course, that's 300 words. And then, of course, again, conclusion of 300 words. Now, these aren't exact amounts, and you can move the word counts around, but I think it can be useful to have a rough idea of how much you want to spend on each section, because also it'll give you an idea of where you need to do research. You need to make sure that you've got, for example, at least one reference for each of those sections in your second half. So that gives you an idea of the kind of things you need to look for and how to spread your work. So let's quickly run through the rough structure of an essay. Your introduction then, of course, is going to be about 10% of your word count. And in your introduction, you need to make sure that you explain what question you are answering and what your line of argument will be to answer that question. And it's often useful to give a brief outline of your essay here, because that will help you to show how your line of argument will work. In your main body, you need to make sure that each paragraph is tied into the main question, thinking about what you are doing and why. Why are you covering this subject in your essay? So, of course, each paragraph will have 3 parts. You'll start with your topic sentence, which shows the relevance to your line of argument. You then develop it, and then you can use evidence. To use evidence to support your arguments, you can use quotes, and you can also use examples. Using examples of your own is really helpful for showing understanding of the ideas that you are talking about. And as we keep saying, it's really important to be critical, not just descriptive. So you need to consider what are the strengths and the weaknesses of the ideas that you are discussing. A quick word about quotes. Quotes can be really useful as your essay ends, of course, with your conclusion. Again, you're looking at roughly 10% of your word count. In your conclusion, you need to come back to the answer to the overall question. What has your line of argument been, and how have you supported this? And it can be useful here to think about any implications that this argument might have. Finally then, your bibliography comes at the end of your essay and should follow the Harvard form. You need to use citations in your main text whenever you mention a fact or an opinion that is not your own. It's never a bad thing to use citations. They help to show that your ideas are supported by research. Please remember to add page numbers whenever you use a quote. So if you copy something directly from the original source, it needs to have the page number that it comes from. The full reference for your citations goes in the bibliography, which of course should be in alphabetical order. And the rule is that everything in your bibliography should appear as a citation in your essay, and everything cited in your essay should have the full reference in your bibliography. In other words, your citations and your bibliography should match. The idea is that anyone reading your essay who finds an idea in it that they want to follow up should be able to follow your citation to the bibliography and then be able to go and find that resource for themselves. So that's a very quick overview on writing essays.